Hello again from the People's Lawyer channel. Today we're building resilience. We're in part 4, so it's building resilience to navigate the apocalypse. And today's theme is lawfare. What do I mean by lawfare? Well, it's a form of legalized genocide. It enables the corporations and the globalists to depopulate without actually it being a problem at law in their legal system. How does this work? Well, let's have a look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. And you may think that that's a positive thing. You may think that that grants you something that you didn't have before. Nothing could be further from the truth. The rights that you have, the freedoms that you have, you are born with. They are sacrosanct. They are divine given rights, God-given rights. Nobody can take them away. That's known as unalienable rights. And the rights that were granted by the corporations, particularly the United Nations in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, were not fundamental rights. They are more like privileges. They're not really rights. And as we'll see by the wording of Article 29, everything that would normally be amoral, immoral, and completely unlawful, how it can be made to be legal with no legal consequences, which is why it is so important to know who we are. And that was covered in an earlier part to this series. Article 29, subsection 2 says, in the exercise of his rights and freedoms, his includes hers, it involves everyone here, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect. Law here, of course, means man-made law, corporate policy, due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others. That's the key. It's always others that need to have their rights respected more than you or I. Continuing, and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order. Be careful of that one. They've got public order legislation. And the general welfare, if they call a pandemic, the general welfare means the goalpost shifts and the individual no longer matters in a democratic society. And if you look at my Globalese lexicon, which will be featured in part 6, then you will see what democratic society really means. Subsection 3, these rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes. Well, the purposes are the depopulation agenda, the eugenics agenda, and principles of the United Nations. This is what they rely on to depopulate in a legal way, or to mass control entire cultures, entire nations. The individual, according to Article 29, must have their rights curtailed and minimized or reduced for the sake of, they say here, general welfare, but now we have phrases like the greater good. And in effect, the greater good is the globalists' agenda. In the UK, at least, we have our own legislation, which we need to be very aware of. This is also lawfare. It's legislation created to attack, to, in effect, torture the people or to enable the torture of people when a pandemic or other emergency is declared. Let's see what it says. Under this act, the government can use emergency powers to bring in regulations to deal with national or local emergencies. So it's not just national or international, it's local as well, as defined in sections 1, subsection 1 and 1, subsection 2. Section 1, in this part, emergency means an event or situation which threatens serious damage to human welfare in a place in the United Kingdom. B, an event or situation which threatens serious damage to the environment of a place in the United Kingdom. Or, more interestingly for our purposes right now, C, war or terrorism which threatens serious damage to the security of the United Kingdom. Well, I say that C is more relevant right now because we have the threat of or the alleged threat of World War III. But in fact, subsection A may be ultimately of more interest because that's a situation which threatens serious damage to human welfare. And that really is the next pandemic, the bird flu pandemic. Under section 20, a senior minister may make emergency regulations without recourse to Parliament. Let that one sink in. Without recourse to Parliament. So emergency is declared and emergency regulations can simply be enacted by a senior minister. Not the cabinet, not Parliament assembled, just one senior minister, which presumably would be the Minister for Health. And it says, if A, the emergency has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur, B, the need to take remedial action is necessary, or C, the need to take action is urgent. If the bird flu pandemic, which according to the WHO, as I speak now in July of 2024, is, quote, around the corner, close quotes, then we need to bear this legislation in mind. And even if they don't have the pandemic treaty in place, it may turn out that the pandemic treaty was a false flag, that all the relevant nations have got their own legislation in place and they don't need a pandemic treaty. They certainly didn't need the pandemic treaty for alleged, did they? We also have the Localism Act 2011, section 16, which is the delegation of functions by a minister to permitted authorities. Subsection 1, a minister of the Crown may, to such extent and subject to such conditions as that minister thinks fit, delegate to a permitted authority any of the minister's eligible functions. That fits nicely with the Civil Contingencies Act 2004. Subsection 2, a function is eligible for the purposes of subsection 1 if A, it does not consist of a power to make regulations or other instruments of a legislative character, or a power to fix fees or charges. In other words, it's not about enabling a permitted authority to make regulations. B, the Minister of the Crown considers that it can appropriately be exercised by the permitted authority. This is talking about functions. It could be 15-minute cities, it could be lockdowns. Lockdown does not involve making regulations. It involves simply putting in place policy that's based on regulations that have already taken place, been enacted with the coronavirus regulations and the civil contingencies legislation. Everything is in place, and the international considerations should not deflect us from looking more locally for the source of tyranny. Some people are concerned by the possibility of conscription. I personally think that it's a psyop and a false flag, but I will raise the issue anyway and give it some consideration, hopefully quite brief. Who is bound by conscription? Well, 1, citizens and subjects. If you consider yourself a citizen of the UK or a subject of the Crown, in other words, a person, a human resource, all those duped into believing that they are the legal name. If you stand under and by the legal name, if you respond to the legal name, if you have licenses, driver's licenses, and have not yet realized that they're not you, they're simply a legal title that identifies the man or woman, then a junior version of you, in other words, your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, could easily be duped into feeling that they are obliged to sign up for military service. Well, it would only be the legal name that has an obligation, never the man or woman. And in subsection 2 there it says, men and women are not bound. Those with a conscience and self-awareness not bound by conscription. In other words, it's all about consciousness. And subsection 3, and especially those are not bound who are men and women that have status corrected. Now, this series of Building Resilience, I have mentioned status correction once, and it's the English Counties Assembly version with formal paperwork, duly autographed and witnessed and sent off to the Foreign Secretary, and that's just the initial paperwork. I've mentioned it once and I am mentioning it again here, but no further details will be put out in this series of Building Resilience. I will save that for a separate series after I have included status correction in my own course. I'm currently rolling it out for myself, trialing it, testing it, watching how other people do the same, and it looks as though it's working. And so later on in 2024, we will have a much bigger push, promotional push and rollout. What remedy is available if you consider yourself a citizen and subject? Well, do not refuse, never refuse military service, never refuse anything. It's dishonorable. They're running a corporate commercial system. Refusal is not the way to go. It simply brings the beast down on your head. Do not ignore either. Simply accept the offer on conditions and make sure that you've done your due diligence so you know that you're offering conditions that they cannot fulfill. For example, if they can prove that you are the person that they have written to. Now, you may say, wait a minute, if I'm not the person that they have written to, why am I responding? And this is a very good question. And it is becoming more and more obvious that total disengagement, in other words, ignoring their offers, can work. It's certainly working for some students on my course. Remember, therefore, the option of total disengagement. Number 2, for men and women, return the offer unopened, addressee not recognized. There's your alternative to total disengagement. Just return the offer unopened, addressee not recognized. If you know that you're a man or a woman and you would be in breach of the Postal Services Act 2000, which creates the offence of opening mail not addressed to you, addressed to another person, and that legal fiction is another person, it's not you. Point 3, if you are status corrected, if you've done advanced paperwork and sent that paperwork to the Foreign Secretary, your notice of expatriation of the legal name, then you owe no allegiance to the United Kingdom. You are, in effect, an English national, therefore a foreign national. Foreign nationals cannot be compelled to do anything. This will give you an idea of what status correction means when it comes to the English Counties Assembly. And above all, if you are besieged by agents, if a pandemic has been declared or some emergency, and you do not wish to be controlled or imprisoned or arrested or whatever, then maintain total silence. It is your unalienable God-given right. You never have an obligation to do or say anything unless it's under contract. The right to silence is sacrosanct. It also encompasses total disengagement when they send something by post. And this is your ultimate remedy, the right to silence. If, in the worst case scenario, you are arrested and held, maintaining silence will mean they have to release you. They may use vile tricks like keeping you inside for 23 hours, but if you maintain silence, and of course they've got no living witnesses to anything that you've done wrong, it's only corporate policy, it's globalist policy, you cannot be imprisoned for an alleged breach of corporate policy if that's all they have. If there is no evidence of criminality, they have to release you. That brings an end to part 4, lawfare, and a brief description of what to do about it and how to prepare for it. Stay tuned for part 5, when we will look at the practicalities of active resistance. Remember to like and subscribe on the Telegram channel and the YouTube channel, and go on the website for more free videos. There's over 70 now. Look forward to Speaking to you again soon. Take care of yourselves and bye for now.